Welcome back to the 127 Fit podcast. Today's guest is the owner of Rocky Mountain Flex Fitness. He is also a bodybuilder, speaker, author, and sponsored athlete. Today's guest is Nicholas Natt. Nicholas, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit podcast.
Hugh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here connecting with you, and I'm excited, man. Thanks for having me.
For sure, my man. So we are going to just jump right into what I like to call the conversational warm-up questions. The first question that I have for you, Nick, is how do you start your day? Do you have a specific morning routine or morning ritual that you like to stick to on most mornings?
Awesome. Great question.
Thank you.
You know, morning is very important, man, and I'd be lying to you if I know who it was that coined the phrase, win the morning, win the day. But I became such a firm believer in that. And the reason I became a firm believer in that is because your morning sort of dictates the tempo for how your morning's going to go, how the middle of the day is going to go, and really just kind of your thought process in perpetuity. So, you know, it took me a while. This is probably 3 years in the making of kind of fine-tuning what's worked for me, whether I'm in competition preparation or whether this is just day-to-day, off-season building phase, whatever. So generally I like to get up. It's usually between 4 o'clock and about quarter after 4. If it's competition preparation, and I'm usually pushing that 30 minutes earlier. And the reason I'll do that is because I have to get a certain amount of exercise done in the morning. Mm-hmm. But I like to wake up early, and then I'll do something called the Wim Hof. Q, are you familiar with Wim Hof?
I am, absolutely. Yep.
So I usually Wim Hof first thing in the morning. There used to be a lot more reluctancy in that, but now it's sort of autopilot. And directly after that, I like to meditate. Meditation was pretty peculiar because for a while it was so hard to just really not try to control the process. You know what I mean? Like, it's very hard to not make sure that I'm letting the thought in or that I'm just letting the thought drift. Mm-hmm. And what helped me was using Headspace. So Headspace, I just started following the apps, and it was really easy because I felt like I was being guided through the process, but then I wasn't having to focus on messing up or not messing up. It was just really easy, right? It was just really easy.
Yeah.
It was just transitional. So usually what I'll do is I'll Wim Hof, I'll wake up, and then I will usually do about a quarter teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt with about 12 ounces of water. That's just to restore the electrolytes and make sure that my body and my system is moving forward. And then I'll go and I'll meditate. That's foundation. That does not change. Traveling, cut, snow, winter, good day, bad day, doesn't matter. That's paramount. That's kind of foundation.
Awesome.
From there, generally what I like to do is put on either some coined music that I really tap into on an emotional level. It's usually something that's bringing me up, so it's usually a little bit faster tempo beat music, or I like to put on some of my favorite podcasts and talk from YouTube. And the reason I do that is because a lot of those podcasts or video casts that those authors and that those influencers use are, it's so easy to look at the abundance of content that's on there. And again, if you're thinking about what I've done to really set my mind up, at that point, my mind's like a canvas. It's already primed to go uphill in the positivity or the proactivity, but listening to those messages really just kind of helps me think to myself, how is this applicable to Nick? How is this applicable for the hats that you're going to be wearing in a day if I know I'm going to be doing something that I don't want to do? Or if I'm going to be in a position where I have to step up, or if I'm going to be in a position where I have a great opportunity. What it's really inviting and what it really does is it kind of helps me get in front of that, and that tends to be a lot more soothing, and usually is a lot better of an outcome. And then the last piece before I get into breakfast is usually some form of a workout. 9 times out of 10, it's aerobic or anaerobic cardio, but that's kind of the focus. And then I'll eat, and 5:30, we're usually starting the day with clients and meetings and going full speed.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing the depth of that, and I would agree with that statement that you said Nick, win the morning, win the day. Because I firmly believe, and this is kind of what I say, is how you start your day is how you're going to finish your day. So that's why that question in regards to the morning routine or ritual it's been there from day one with the podcast, because there's very few. I've had over 100 in-person podcast conversations, and I can count on one hand how many people don't have a very specific morning routine. And everybody that I'm bringing onto my podcast is, on that next level, moving towards that next level. They're excelling in business, life, and all that. So there's another saying that's out there is success leaves clues, right?
Exactly.
So we know if 99.9% of the quote unquote successful people in terms of the world have a morning routine and they're sticking to that on the majority, then that's a clue that we can kind of tap into. So the next question that I have for you, Nick, do you have a favorite book or book that you like to gift often?
Yeah, I guess it's really kind of a handful of books. This holiday season, I think the one that I gifted most frequent was called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. So Simon Sinek, and the reason that I have really launched his work here, because he's written a total of 3 books that I'm aware of. And the first one had a very definitive approach on something that I take to heart, and it really has to do with the why. And not to go too deep into that rabbit's hole, but at the end of the day, that's the driving force.
Absolutely.
And that's really what as you define the people who are quote-unquote successful, I think that not so much necessarily in the monetary standpoint, but just people who are really great at finding and identifying a vision and then moving in perpetuity and being able to make that vision kind of manifest itself into their reality, right? And so that's really what his first book did. Between that and his TEDx talk, which is also on YouTube, it's got millions way up there. He had another book called Leaders Eat Last, which, again, in its own way did the same thing. And then The Infinite Game really helped differentiate between what is a finite game, going on stage for bodybuilding. May the best men win, the driest, the hardest, the most definedly built. Same thing with a basketball game. The teams are going to agree on a set of rules. It's going to be called by a set of referees at the end of the game. Highest score wins, right? Those are finite games. But the infinite game really focuses on a lot of what, you and I had a conversation off camera, and you were so adamant about while you started this podcast, Q, was, you want to be able to pour into something bigger than yourself. And that's the infinite game. You cannot win that game. It's just ongoing. It's a cause that you're going to pour into. It wasn't created by you, but you have the opportunity of making it bigger, making it more abundant, and kind of contributing, whatever 2 cents or even more that you want, and leaving that legacy for someone else to adopt and make their own and contribute as well. So I really like that. I think that's kind of been, my ethos of 2020, and how does what you're doing not just affect you, but how does it plant seeds of ambition and transparency in the hearts of other people. And so that was the book that I've been gifting as of recent. And there's other books, but I guess it's really depending on what moves me. What makes it really easy is Audible. Audible is
for
awesome.
sure.
And if people have it, you just get the email and plug and go.
Absolutely cool. Now, the next question is favorite quote, mantra, or word. And recently I've kind of been prefacing this with the fact that, we all as human beings go through different seasons in life. So however you want to take this, Nick, the favorite quote, mantra, word, it could be for this specific season you're in today as we're stepping into this fresh new year 2020, or maybe the favorite quote, mantra, word is something from a previous season. But however you want to go with that, favorite quote, mantra, or word.
Excellent. Yeah. This isn't so much seasons based. I think it just eternally based regardless of whatever walk you are in life. So if you're feeling at the bottom of your life and you really don't know what step to go because you're lost, or you really don't know what's the next thing to do, if you're feeling full of ambition, it's very easy to get into a very comfortable and complacent stage. And how do you keep that hunger going? Well, I think this quote really takes everything encompasses it and then reveals to people kind of the focus of what we are all trying to do as successful leaders and whatever it is that we're doing, whether we're following someone else's just cause or whether we are trying to ourselves develop a culture and then build something and create that in the world. So it's by Martin Luther King. He needs no recognition as to why, but a lot of it, and the reason his quote is so relevant is because of not what he spoke for, but really what he endured. And looking at how he was able to continue moving what he believed in, despite all of the hostility, despite all of the malicious energy that he had to endure in order to stand just, regardless if it was coming from the side of his people, the black community in America, or whether it was coming from the people who were radicals who hated him, right? And this quote is called The Ultimate Measure of a Man. It says this: "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." So the reason that became so apparent to me is because it's easy for all of us to feel at a high, to feel elated, to feel our best when things are going our way, when life is just sort of happening on the up, right? It isn't until something goes wrong, whether it's metaphorically spilled milk and it's kind of an inconvenience, or really you're in the slumber of what, or like what I like to call the trenches, right? That's how your character is going to be tested. And a lot of times what throws us off our guard, whether it's the hustle of our career, whether it's our relationships with the people closest to us, that could be intimate relationships, it could be close friendships, business relationships, or at the end of the day, it could be the very things that make us well-intentioned people, are those outside circumstances that we either ask for, or we ask for, and we don't know that that's coming in the form of drama. And how our character is going to be tested is basically our reaction or our response to that. And I think that became so relevant to me because when I heard that, I was probably at one of the most broken times of my whole life. And it was overwhelmed, not because something bad had happened, but because things were going so well. And because I looked at where I wanted to go, I was full of ambition. And like so many of us, I let somebody who really had no say, no power to say something, influence my emotional thought because they were like, oh, if you're trying to be like this great person, you're so far away because where they are, where you are now, is so widespread. And it kind of, I let that, rain on my parade for a couple days. And hearing that immediately took me out of that and just allowed me to remember that it's that day-to-day focus about how you deal with adversity that's going to matter a lot more than the circumstantials of where you are every day. Beautiful, man. Very, very well spoken and put. Now, the next question is favorite or most listened to podcast, and you can share maybe like a specific podcast. But I'm really intrigued, and I didn't ask you when you were talking about your morning routine because you talked about part of your morning routine is that music, and then like maybe like a YouTube podcast, maybe like some sort of like motivational speech or something like that. So I didn't ask at that time what those were. So favorite or most listened to podcasts, I'm really intrigued to kind of hear who or what you listen to in regards to kind of like that motivation or a podcast or a YouTube person in the morning as a part of that morning routine. Yeah. There's a few people that I listen to, but I would say the number one that I listen to probably the most, and it makes sense if anybody's had the chance to listen to it, he's identified as the mindset guy. So, no surprise there why I tend to take that so much to heart. But it's Tom Bilyeu's podcast, Impact Theory. Yep. And the reason solely I get so intrigued by his podcasts because he has a way with words, and it's easy for him to draw a picture over auditory, media, whatever that is, to help you visually or on any sensory stimuli connect with what he and whatever his guest is saying. But what I like as a poet, what I like that he does is he really takes the glory of the individual, what makes them relevant, what makes that person a leader in whatever it is that they've done, and he really puts them on a pedestal. Just so that way you can understand, hey, you're getting ready to understand where this person's coming from, right? But the majority of his podcast, the 97% that follows, is really about what did you go through, and when you were at the lowest of the low, how did you do that? And it's very strategic, it's very focused. Not to go too much into that, but I love listening to kind of that story of what makes a person great is not the fact that he or she has an incredible amount of potential.
Right.
If they had to eat what Mark Manson refers to as a you-know-what sandwich, then why did they choose that sandwich? And what about their life made them continue to go when they're at the lowest of their low in their life? How do they come out of that? How do they block out the environment that tells them they're not good enough, or all those things that we worry about that just becomes, that's really irrelevant, but it becomes relevant, and our psyche and the human condition seems to feed that, right? So I love that because I feel like, again, to my quote that I had mentioned earlier, we really don't need any help being happy when things are going well. We don't need to be told to smile when, something really cool happens, or when we have someone do something nice for us. It's really in those moments when you don't feel like smiling, you don't feel like showing up, you want to kick the can, or you feel like you want to say something to somebody, that you need that reminder, you need that verbiage, you need to be inspired to do something that's more critical long-term than how you feel in the short term. And he coined a phrase that was also great. It was, dumbfounding when he said it, and it was, don't compromise. He either said don't compromise, don't sacrifice, but don't compromise what's most important to you because of how you feel right now. And
that's good.
That was big. Yeah,
so, cool. And Tom Bilyeu, man, he's like, he was part of the founding of Quest. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And they're
first company to hit first sports nutrition company to hit $1 billion.
Yeah.
I think this company within 1 year, somewhere in the mid 2000s, grew like some 200,000 or 20,000%.
Yeah, crazy.
Which is asinine. For a company. It's a dream.
And I believe at this point in the game, he and his wife have both exited that, right? They're no longer a part of Quest.
Correct.
If I remember right.
Basically, I think they're still sitting on the board, but they've really moved alongside and created Impact Theory and are trying to develop that culture, and simultaneously are now focused on his studio, which he started with his comic book.
Right. Yeah.
And he's partnered with some cool people there.
Yeah, he's definitely
Steve Aoki and some other guys to do some cool things.
He's definitely a next level individual. Now, is there outside of Tom Bilyeu, is there maybe one other individual that you just really appreciate, kind of their motivation, and just kind of like what they put out there in the world?
Absolutely, man. I really like Les Brown. He's a linguist, man. It's like listening to, I grew up listening to R&B music. I'm the baby of 4 in my house, so there's 6 of us between my mom, my dad, and my 3 other siblings, and so R&B was just so ever present in our house, and so he kind of has that slang when he's talking. It's ebony flow, but you connect with it on an emotional level, and that's really what's inspiring. The OG himself, Tony Robbins, man, his stuff is great. I love, I've seen Tony speak, I would say at least 6 times in person.
Wow, cool,
but
cool.
What's so funny is you can listen to something he said, and no matter how many times it registers, when you hear it, you're like, yep, yeah.
Right,
you realize how important you have to drive home those fundamentals. I think, Q, we were talking about sports growing up, right? It's one of those things when you're playing sports and your coach hammers the fundamentals, and you're like, dude, we know how to do this.
Right,
you know what
right,
I mean?
yeah,
but you don't realize how important that is until later when games are relevant. Have you mastered those? Because if you haven't,
right,
then it's not there. So it's
for sure.
Different. But
Cool. Awesome.
Those 3 are probably the biggest.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, so kind of at this point in our conversation, Nick, we are going to kind of just take a full dive or a full step into your story. So I would love to have you share with myself and the 127 Fit podcast listeners, if you don't mind. Where did you grow up? You kind of just already mentioned, the four siblings and then your parents. But so where did you grow up? What did the kind of those younger years look like for you? Were you involved in sports, extracurricular activities? Just kind of like share a little bit, navigate for us those younger years, and then kind of once we get up to high school, we'll kind of stop there and then move on.
Yeah, so my dad was a professional athlete.
Okay.
He played sports in Louisiana on a full ride. He was just, I think my dad's career from high school all the way to college is that, epidemiology that any athlete would want. He started varsity as a freshman, state runner-up 2 years in a row, and then won state 2 years, MVP both his senior and junior year. Got a full ride scholarship to University of Louisiana Monroe. Now I think it's called Northeast Louisiana, but I think their senior year they made it to the NAIA tournament. He goes into the first round draft of the NBA, and I think Magic Johnson went first. I think my dad was number 6.
Wow,
so,
that's pretty cool.
Larry Bird, a lot of those guys came out of that class. So it's something to be proud of, and my family has a lot of pride in that, as I believe we should, because Dad laid down a great legacy. And the reason I start with that is not, again, to talk and parade so much on his accomplishment. I mean, because that was years ago. No offense, Pops, but I think the big thing is to understand really what that meant. My dad was born in 1957, as well as my mom in Louisiana, and this was at a time when blacks weren't allowed to play sports at the professional level. And so my dad grew up in Monroe. If anybody's ever been to the South or some of the small towns of the backcountry, whether it's the Bayou or it's the Florida Everglades, things like that, there's not a whole lot of opportunity. And the big thing that was driving for him was this mill. It was like this steel mill, which was basically people in this town went there, they worked, and just kind of stayed there. And my dad was not the oldest sibling. He had 2 other siblings, my uncle, God rest his soul, he's passed now, but and my aunt, and then he's sort of that, leader, and then my other aunts and my other uncles, and my grandma kept them in the church, and basketball was the escape, not just because it was an outlet for him to kind of tap into and use as a tool to move himself in life, but also that was really all they had. So I take a lot of pride in that, because a lot of times I think it's the recognition of, can you see the light in really a dark or a narrow tunnel? And he lived that. He was the first inspiration before any of these podcasts, even before I really understood what he did, to find somebody who was genetically gifted but put a relentless amount of work in to put himself in that position. And so I bring that up because growing up, it was always the hard work. Naturally, my brother and I, Dad being a pro ball player, that's what we wanted to do. And unlike a lot of other kids, unfortunately, we were never shamed for having that dream, because Dad was Calvin Natt. Yeah. He was an all-star when he played for the Nuggets, right? So it was like, oh, you want to be like your dad? You're tall? Oh, yeah, you could definitely be a pro ball player, know? Whereas I think the conversation is very different for other kids. It's kind of like, you want to be a professional ball player? Well, what's your second, thing? Because it's kind of, what's the likelihood or risk of that? So hard work was put into my sisters and my brothers and I from a very early age, and it wasn't really pushed on us ever to be professional athletes, but laziness wasn't accepted in the house. My dad had us working in the house. It was kind of dumbfounding. We grew up in this kind of white-collar, blue-collar neighborhood, and people had their grasses cut. And it wasn't that, people didn't cut their grass, but we would be out there working. People were like, what's up with this, super crazy labor? And it was just how my dad grew up.
Yeah.
He laid that foundation. So I say that because playing sports, being extremely active was a huge part of it. And I think as a whole, whether it was, my mom's, focus, which she didn't play that in school. My dad didn't play that with. It came to sports or activities. It wasn't get by, let us go. It was, hey, if you're going to do this, you have to do it to the best of your ability. That was sort of something that they demanded. And that is sort of what trickled down from my brother all the way to my sisters, all the way to myself, until we even got to high school.
Cool. Now, I mean, that's a very unique upbringing that you had with your dad being a professional athlete. Now, you know, you kind of touched on all the positives of having, you know, that powerful force in your life in regards to your dad and his accomplishments. Before we move on kind of past high school and kind of that childhood, was there anything negative that you experienced, maybe just kind of like your own feelings or your own emotions, Nick, in regards to kind of like your dad being a pro athlete? Because, you know, you mentioned like people are like, hey, like, man, you're tall and your dad's a pro athlete. You could be a pro athlete. So there's that possibility of maybe you doing something more. But also I've seen from kind of the outside perspective when, you know, you have a parent or an adult in your life when you're a young kid that really has some fame, some fortune, some recognition, that can also be very negative for a young person growing up. So did you have any experiences in regards to just yourself personally that because of your dad's fame and because of his success, did that cause any struggle for you personally?
Well, I think what I will say to that, Quentin, that's a great question, by the way, so kudos to you for asking that, man. Everything that I would say has been a positive. It's been serving, right? You can look at your life and you can see that things happen for you or they happen against you. So what I will say is that I'm very grateful for everything that's happened because it's brought me here today. But using the words in the way that you have, I would say things that were challenging for me in my childhood that I distinctly remember were being the youngest, you know, being number 6 in the family.
Yeah.
Not because I ever was intentionally pushed down and quieted because I didn't have a voice, but naturally growing up in a household, and if anybody knows my family, you know how loud it and how much fun we can be. It's hard to have a voice when you're younger because everyone's trying to be heard, everyone's trying to have an opinion, and obviously, you know, I felt that a lot of times my opinion didn't matter. Now, on the flip side, what that helped me do was it helped me sit back and sort of understand and sort of ask questions. That's what made me interested in the human condition. Where that became an issue, which cultivated as an insecurity, which ended up becoming a strength later in life, was I thought I was weird. The reason I thought I was weird is because, you know, growing up in a family where you're seeing things happening really from afar, you begin to ask yourself questions. Well, why does this person ask this question? Or why are they going to go, metaphorically, pick up the cast iron if it's just going to burn them? Well, I began to learn vicariously through observation. And again, that made me act a certain way because I was able to see, you know, through what would probably happen if you're able to think, again, like in perpetuity or in the focus, if you're able to project in the future what sort of outcome you want. That's not a very popular thing when you're a kid, especially moving through adolescence, right? So I always thought it was weird because, you know, you're sort of this kid who has this well-intentioned thought, and kids are like, that's you know, weird, or that's dumb. And of course, you know, now as an adult, that's sort of what they're trying to teach the world, you know. But I had that from a very early age, and so I always thought that was kind of peculiar. And the other thing that really stands out was I did really want to be a professional ball player. It wasn't until I got to undergrad that I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. And it was hard letting that go. And I think a big part of that was because I never felt that my dad or anyone in my family was going to shun or shake their head in disgust or shame because I'm not pursuing ball. But I think a big part of it was that underlying paradigm that this is what I was supposed to do. So my path was already drawn out for me because my dad was a pro athlete. That's just what I was going to do. But it just wasn't compelling. I wasn't passionate about competing at that level in ball. What I did know is I was sure I was competitive. I just didn't have that hunger for basketball. And so letting that go was a struggle, and that happened first year of college, and I struggled with it, man. I went through a lot of depression. I was very internal about it, so not only was there this cultivating, I guess you want to say, monologue happening inside my head, but it really was quiet. I did not let a lot of people know about that. And, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So the problem with that is if you're not really having that conversation, you're not really channeling that out, then it's manifesting itself physically. And so I endured a lot of stress, man, at a very early age. And it wasn't something that I recommend for a lot of people just because of that process.
Well, you did an amazing job of kind of transitioning from like the childhood and then touching on the college. So let's just continue with that conversation.
Sure.
So, just tell us where you went to college, and then I would love to have you just expound a little bit more on, what you kind of like were working through and struggling through in regards to letting go of basketball, and then maybe stepping really into what you were passionate about and what you want to do. So where did you go to college? And then just expound a little bit more on some of those struggles of letting go of basketball and moving on from there.
Excellent. So yeah, my mom and my dad went to Northeast. My brother graduated from Northeast. My oldest sister, she didn't graduate from Northeast, but she did go there for a little while. She started off at Prairie View, went there, then finished up out here at CU Denver. Boo, Ashley, go Rams. Sorry, it's a little internal family feud because she's a Buff and I'm a Ram.
Yeah.
But my other sister also graduated from Northeast. And so naturally in that time, again, as I had mentioned before, my thought process was, well, I'm just going to go to Northeast and play ball where my dad played ball.
Yeah.
And that time, I just didn't want to follow in my parents' footsteps. And so I would be lying if I said half of it was rebellious. The other half of it was I needed to find Nick's voice.
Absolutely.
I needed to become my own individual, and I was number 6 in the family. I really needed to find out there's nothing wrong with the great foundations that my family and my parents have put in place, but I need to find out, are those the paradigms that I stand for? Are those the values that I believe in? And if not, what are the values I believe in? Why do I think about, what do I think about the world? Why do I think that about the world? And so I had a lot of friends from high school going to Mesa State College at the time. Now it's called Colorado Mesa University. And I knew I wasn't going to stay there. That caused a little bit of friction with me and my mom. If I'm saying that in the nice way.
Right.
A little bit of friction, right? But I went there for about a year and a half, not even a year and a half, I'd say a year and a quarter. And then I transferred to Colorado State University, which is where I graduated from.
Awesome. Now, what did you study while you were in college? And then also, you had mentioned previously kind of some of that struggle of letting go of basketball. So I kind of want you just to share a little bit of that experience while you were going to college. So what did you study? And then just some of those struggles of, letting go of basketball. And then, like, as you mentioned earlier, finding Nick's voice.
So my degree is a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology, Sports Psychology, right? So half of it is biomechanics, is with exercise, health and exercise science. It's the exercise physiology. It's the anatomy of the body, how the body moves, and the anatomy and physiology. And then the other half of it is the study of psychology, which is why we study if we have a certain behavior. Where does that behavior come from? How does that play around across certain scenarios and certain environmental stimuli with the individual? Sociology looks at that across a group of individuals, but psychology more focused on the individual.
Right.
So in short story, why I did not go the traditional psychiatrist route, and this is not to quote unquote on any professional who happens to be a therapist or a psychiatrist, because kudos to those people. I could not see myself working in a lab. I couldn't see myself sitting behind a desk. I'm not ADD, but I envision my personality being too ADD. The sports psychology really helped me understand that there's a lot to integrate the information. It's not just theory, and it's not just this metaphorical argument over the table about is it theoretical or empirical. I really wanted to be part of the solution. I really wanted to be in the mud working with people, and if we're going to have conversations, getting a chance to have a conversation on a podcast like this can happen. But then if people are saying, Nick, I relate to your message. How can I change the way that I think, or I want to be better? How do I do that? I felt like having a background in psychology would help, but there's so many effective circumstances that you could look at. And so that's what really drove me to go a very I would say, directional or a very high travel directional route when it came to psychology. And to your second half of the question, when I quit basketball and I moved to CSU, it was exciting at first, maybe in the first few weeks because, I'm not playing ball competitively and having to do the rituals and the lifting and the team practices and just, having a schedule that's really spoken for. Well, that gets fun for about a week. And then you start to really realize that that schedule, that well-intentioned system helps you. It helps you have structure. It helps you have clarity. And everything just really seems to fall in place. And not having that was hard because I could make any impulsive decision I wanted and not really have too much of a midifying consequence. But I really didn't feel like anything that I did mattered. And so what I'm really saying is it felt like I was just going through the motions. And that's what I think brought about a big part of the depression, because I'm doing something, but I don't feel like I'm having relevance in my whole life. I feel internally that voice, that higher calling that we all have, tells you you're supposed to go out and do something great in the world. You're supposed to go out and travel. Well, if that becomes a conviction, and that conviction is a hardcore belief in your infrastructure, and everything you're doing on the outside is a contradiction to that, then you're going to have some serious disequilibrium in your life. And so that caused some, and again, like most kids, you got to cope.
Absolutely.
You got to cope. And so, friends were great. College gave me a chance to do some partying. I never was into recreational drugs. I never did that. But, there was a lot of drinking. I had a chance to join a fraternity, and the fraternity was great. A lot of great guys I had a chance to meet. We had a great opportunity to do a lot of service, not just in the Fort Collins community, but in the community of, something much bigger. And I think that was a saving grace. There were a lot of good guys in that community that helped push me to stay grounded. I had a really good network and really good friends outside of that. And I would say a good friend of mine, shout out to you, Sean Grant, was a personal trainer back at Mesa State. So he was a roommate of mine before I left Mesa. And he had been in the professional space as a personal trainer. And I just saw what he was doing, and I had asked him some questions, and, it's kind of that thing, people have to see something in you before you see something in yourself. And I would say that was the first drip, because at the time, Facebook existed, you didn't have Instagram, and even with influencers, that wasn't really a word at the time being thrown around. So what was so exciting about that was you had a chance to really look at what this movement online is happening. And he's just like, man, you can be great at that, And so bodybuilding wasn't really in the picture at the time. It was just about really helping people. And we literally had a conversation, and it was like a light bulb flicked. Something internally was like, if you don't pursue that, what are you doing? And I think what was so magnetizing about that inspired me to take so much action was because, to me, it wasn't about personal training and finding something that was a better paying job. What it really was about is taking people who want to do something, playing a very definitive part in the creativity process of how that person's going to be able to move from where they are to where they want to be, and then being able to take that to scale. What do I mean? Well, if a person wants to drop 20 pounds, great. But really that 20 pounds is 30 pounds, great. Well, how do they gain 15 pounds of muscle? Great. Well, how do they get ready for a show? It just continues to move according to whatever it is they want to do, whether that's a triathlon or whether that's just being happy or whether it's being in a position where they get off their diabetes medication. So I really became fascinated with that. And at the time, I was like, well, there's this recovery thing out there, and people are using these like ice tubs, and what if I was to create a facility that had ice tubs, but at the same time you go work out, but at the same time did this? And before I really understood how that medium would look in a modern reality, the vision was already jumped in. So to kind of wrap that thought up, what ended up happening is a lot of people would go home over winter break. This was my senior year. And I went home for Christmas. I literally stayed, I think, home 2 days. And it wasn't anything against the family. It was just that I had been bitten by this bug. And of course, like most people in undergrad, it's kind of that, what am I going to do? And Do I have an answer for my life? And for the first time, I felt inspired because I was like, okay, this is, I know what I want to do.
Right.
Even not knowing what the vision was going to look like, I knew what the long-term vision was going to be. And so I picked up a personal training book. I had a couple conversations, and I realized I was going to get certified, and that was the first tangible seed towards playing into that bigger role.
Love that. Love that. All right. So let's kind of like just expound then, Nick, on kind of like your evolution in regards to personal training. Now, before we do that though, it's very interesting because you studied, like kind of like the exercise science and the psychology. So, and I'm assuming, growing up being an athlete, I'm sure you spent some time in like the weight room and working out. Is that correct?
I guess you could say that.
Okay, yeah. Basketball, is probably a little bit different, but you were at least exposed to some sort of training, right?
My dad, was a big guy. He was not very tall. I mean, it's funny to say that because he's, in his prime 6'7", and people are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that's not very tall in the NBA.
Right,
playing against guys 6'9", 6'10",
Right.
So, no, but what allowed him to, quote unquote, be a bully on the court was his athleticism and his size. And so he really incorporated that the weight room could be that catalyst that could help see the game. And, I am a product of my dad's genetics, so I was, bigger and taller than a lot of guys. But even in high school, when guys begin to catch up, you need that extra variable. And what was so, like you said, apparent that not a lot of athletes, but especially the basketball team, no offense to you guys, just very reluctant to understand what weights can do.
Yeah.
They had a very poor athlete attitude when it came to lifting weights, and so I learned a lot of lifting weights from him early on. So I had a great work ethic when it came to the weight room. And
so that then I'm assuming tied into kind of like how you picked your major for college then, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so it's, I love this. This happens a lot when I'm having these conversations with my guests on the podcast, is that it's so interesting, Nick, how certain things happen, in our childhood, and then that kind of prepares us. And most of the time we don't realize like what's going on in our childhood, how that's going to manifest or, bring something about later in adulthood. But it's interesting how, your dad kind of exposed you to the work ethic and the strength training. And then that kind of like, sparked some sort of interest of studying what you studied. And then that kind of like ties into, you stepping into personal training, but that wasn't even your focus going into college. You know what I mean? Like, it's so interesting how certain circumstances and things like that in our childhood prepare us for adulthood. So I want to completely just jump into, the personal training and get into the bodybuilding and kind of who you are today, because that's, a huge part of obviously your story. And there's a lot of things that I kind of want to just peel back and discuss with you in regards to the bodybuilding and the fitness and all that. So you kind of left off, you had this, friend or a roommate that was kind of doing some personal training. You kind of like caught this bug and this interest of it. You kind of, are starting to be inspired. So at that point, let's just start talking about how you got kind of like into personal training and what were those first few years like for you in that profession.
Well, going back to undergrad, we have to, there's either a practicum or there's an internship. So I chose the internship route, and I was able to work with a sports psychologist. Now, this guy, as a whole, this doctor, was very interested more on the emotional side about connecting and understanding the psychology of how teams play into a role. And so with sports psychology, there's really two avenues that you're seeing, and it's a lot of the technique that athletes work on, whether it's Tiger Woods or LeBron James, and how to get yourself into flow state, and a lot of those things that we can really figure out that allows us to step into our elite, genuine zone as an athlete. And then there's this other side that looks a lot more at the collective piece of it, and there's a lot more physical to it. And so it's understanding, well, what is the chemistry or the biochemistry playing into the body? If you understand cortisol, how does cortisol play into performance? Well, if you are getting low levels of sleep, and you're not happy with your circumstances at home, how is that going to play over the course of 5-6 games that you have in the next 4 days? Well, you can see that's probably not going to look uphill, right? So the reason that that was so relevant is because I thought I was going to go more into athletic training. So I thought I was going to go more into the route.
Yeah.
My dad had a great connection to a guy out here in Colorado. I won't name drop, but he's very affiliated with the Nuggets. And at the time, the concept was, well, you're going to go to grad school and get your master's, which is required. And I could do an internship through the NBA and then have my choice of the litter, depending on if it was going to be one team or depending on what team is willing to be open, right? And it wasn't until, again, kind of brought me back to that point, what do I want to do? And I think I was so driven about the long-term entrepreneurial concept of transforming the lives of the people around me. Athletes, again, there's nothing wrong with that, but those people are built, almost in a manufactured way to say, hey, your level of ambition is not questioned. You got to show up level 10. Good day, bad day, everything in between. Leave it at the door, come in. And the reality is that athletes, I find, are able to do that even if at an unconscious level, or subconscious level, because you've been able to do that for so long. And a lot of people don't even know that.
Right.
Whereas it's a lot harder with the day-to-day person. It's a lot harder, people wear their emotions on their sleeves. And I think a lot of people don't want to have that. And, I think that there's so much that can be taken from that because that's really an asset. It's just that you have to understand essentially what that information means. And so, kind of being able to build this career, it was figuring out, okay, I can get into personal training. That led me to get certified. That led me, at the time, with a great mentor of mine. Her name is Mary T. I don't mind name dropping her. She was able to help me get my start in fitness, right? And so it started off with classes moved to personal training. And at the time, she had done a show some years ago. And my thing for her was, in almost a harassing way, was figuring out what certifications do I need to get to distinguish myself, because that's really what it's like in the professional world.
For sure.
How do you curate a name for yourself? And, she was like, Nick, whatever you want to do, kind of, I don't know the answer to that.
Right,
God bless her for being so patient. And the one thing she did spit out, like, oh, this would be a great idea, I just shot it down. It was bodybuilding, and I was like, yeah, I forget that. So it's kind of funny because people are like, what? You never wanted to be a bodybuilder? And I was just like, no. You know what I mean? So what ended up happening is I think this is at this time, it was about 2011, 2012, so I graduated from CSU. And I'm, trying to make my name in the fitness career. I'm working for the YMCA at the time. And a good guy, I won't name drop him either, but I knew him when he went to school at Greeley at UNC. And when I had first seen him, he didn't look the way he did when I saw him on this poster. And they had just introduced the men's physique division, and I was dumbfounded by the look because I just figured this is it. Like, this is the look every guy wants. It represents confidence, it represents sex appeal, but it also represents that epitome of an athlete, and I didn't have an interest in being a bodybuilder at the time. So, long story short, again, what ended up happening was I decided to hop into a show. I had Mary train me because I didn't know anything else. She had helped someone years prior get ready for a show, and he did well, so I'm like, well, if she could help him do well, she could help me do well.
For sure.
And we really just kind of threw some stuff at the wall, hoping it would stick. I think I dieted for like, it's funny to say this, I think it was like 6 weeks or something like that. And I mean, you talk about the mindset, man, I was just not, because you don't know what you don't know.
Of course.
I just did not have the mindset, because I'm gone from being a basketball athlete to eating any way that I've wanted. To being like, yeah, you have to do cardio and you have to do weights and you really can't drink and you really can't eat something. And it was dumbfounding. So fast forward, I do a show, I enter in one division, and I think I got 4th place. And no disrespect to the guy who won, I won't name drop him, but I looked in the pictures and I was like, I mean, on stage, I was like, this guy light years ahead of me. And it wasn't until I had a chance to look at pictures from the show that I realized I actually had him beat. Like, I was there, and that's when I really understood you have to fine tune and learn the whole ins and outs of the sport. So the competitive bug bit me. It was like, hey, you don't have to win, but you gotta do better than what you
For
did.
sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I didn't do the next show, but fast forward to October. So this was July of 2012.
Okay.
And then 2012 in October, I did that show and I won first place in 2 divisions. First place in one, first place in another one, and then I was hooked, man.
Okay, cool.
So that's really how that happened.
I love it. So then when you started competing, were you simultaneously then also continuing to personal train and really try to build your clientele?
Absolutely. So while I'm competing, it was really about, now that you're getting these pictures, now that you've done these shows, you need to post that on your platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the time, again, Facebook is out.
Yeah.
A lot of these other platforms really aren't, but like Instagram at the time wasn't out, Snapchat, things like that. But you can post those pictures on Facebook. And so what became very strong and very evident for me in between 2014 and even 2015 from 2012, those really 3 to 4 years at the time before those other platforms came out, was separating myself as just, oh, this is Nicholas Natt on Facebook, this is the guy I went to school with, or this is the guy that I know, or whatever. It was really identifying, oh, this is the fitness guy. And my whole back of my mind, I wanted to be known as, oh, this is the fitness mindset guy. I think I've cultivated that now, but at the time, I was looking for money. We're young, we're out of the business world, we want the money, right? So posting that I'm taking on clients, I think, but then being able to take pictures and talk about the goals and how excited I was, I think kind of dropped that seed in people's mind, oh, this guy is doing it for real. And that's what inspired me to, I think, dream bigger. So even within that, a lot of the seeds that were developed that time in undergrad, that Christmas break that I didn't go home, and I started thinking in further detail. Now for me it was like, if this is beginning to become a little bit more concrete and a little bit more evident, how do I draw those pictures? Like, what steps would I need to take to get to level 2, to get to level 3? And now I call that reverse engineering, but at the time I was just trying to figure out what's the best mode of action. And long story short, there's some opportunities in there that came disguised as very negative situations, but there are definitely opportunities, and that's what laid the groundwork for my business partner and I to open up Rocky Mountain Flex Fitness. So very grateful for that time, because that's what laid the foundation to build on the platform that I have now.
Okay, so mindset is something that you have talked about, just kind of in passing as you're unpacking and sharing your story, Nick. I want, and you've talked about, kind of the Tom Bilyeu's and the Tony Robbins, the Les Browns, and all people that are in that, what is coined now kind of the personal development space. So how, and I know, studying the psychology in college, that has something to do with it, but how have you kind of gained this interest and understanding of the importance of mindset and thoughts? Where did that come about? Was there always kind of a fascination for you in regards to mindset and thoughts and how we kind of control our thoughts, or was it really in college where that developed? And then I just want you to really talk about the importance of that fitness mindset as you referred to it earlier, because mindset, whether it's in fitness or in business or in relationships, I firmly believe mindset is everything. Everything in regards to our existence starts with our mind, our thoughts, and things of that nature. So where did that interest in regards to the mindset really come to fruition? And then, just explain a little bit of how you really try to take that mindset into fitness and pass that on to your clients.
It's a great question. It's a really great question. So along this time when I'm in undergrad, I lived with I call him my brother. We're not biologically related by any means, but he is probably one of the individuals who knows more about me than anybody else. My brother, my fam, best friend, his name is Kevin Hackett. Shout out to Kevin. And we were sitting at home, again, on Christmas break. Not the same Christmas break, but a different one. Kind of funny how these epiphanies happen over
the Christmas breaks. Yeah, it's good.
So we were invited to a travel party. A travel party is a lot like those network marketing parties that bring you, you get invited, you don't know what's going on. I was going to blow it off, God honest belief, and we literally were sitting at home doing nothing, and we're like, might as well go, because what are we going to do here? And we're happy we went, because the gentleman who invited us, we had a chance to meet some other like-minded individuals, and I think, Quentin, to the point that I had mentioned when I was younger that I felt weird, that was the space that kind of was like, oh, that does mean something. These people think the same way I think. I'm not weird. This is just kind of the next phase. And those people were having conversations that people our age weren't having. People in college were kind of, who's turning up, where's the place to be, we're going to blow up when we get out of college, but for now, let's live the life. And these people were like talking about legacy and talking about not just being rich, but being rich with a purpose. What are you going to do with this money? How are you going to impact lives? So it was a much deeper conversation. And that's really, I think, what laid the foundation. And this network marketing organization that we ended up joining, I had a lot of success in at a very early age. And it was just maybe the gift of gab. I think I saw the potential in it. And although we ended up, not being a part of that network marketing organization, it dropped a lot. They used to run these trainings that they did once a month, and they would pick these different states where they would run them. And you'd go and you'd be surrounded by these people from all over the country who would come to these, and you'd have a chance to listen to the main speaker, who was sort of this mindset guy, who was like the company's personal Tony Robbins, who was the head trainer. Then you had the top incomers who all had their unique story. They all looked different. They all hadn't reached the top level, but how they got there and their story was so different, and it really showed me that I think that's when I became married to the struggle. It wasn't so much about this guy having a jet or how much money he was making a month. I mean, all those things were inspiring, but I think it was exciting to hear that this person was eating out of a trash can. This person over here was bankrupt with their wife, and they didn't have any hope. This person had everything, and they were unhappy. To the world, they're like, oh man, you're successful from a monetary standpoint, but they were completely unfulfilled, and every one of those people wanted something deeper, and somehow they were able to cultivate that and build that. I think that's what became inspiring. So they had this disc set that they used to listen to, and we would just listen to these speakers over and over talk about those concepts. Success leaves clues, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I remember we were on our way to this one in Arizona. I'll never forget this. We could not fly, so we all piled into this car. I don't recommend this, but I think there was, 5 seat belts. There had to have been 6 or 7 of us, and there, a bunch of, 19 and 18 and 7 and 20-year-old, young individuals kind of just, sharing the same popsicle, hopefully, trying to get out there. And shout out to one of the top incomers, Don Morton, at the time, who let us stay at his house because we didn't have nobody for a hotel. And he kind of just hosted it and let us stay there, man. It was awesome. But what ended up happening is we had a chance to take out the drive time, and I was really sour about it. I was really salty. And this stands out to me because a lot of times you have to learn to get out of your own way. And the reason I bring that up is because I was knowing who the next speaker was in the drive time. I was so excited, and everybody else is like, let's listen to someone else. And the next audio tape, at the time I didn't know it was an audio tape, it was just, hey, was Unleash the Power Within, which was Tony Robbins' book. So I'm listening to this thing. I kind of have my arms crossed in the back. I'm mad because I want to listen to Drive Time. This guy is talking about healing of the heart and all this sentimental stuff, and I was like, this guy sounds like a total goofball. But I think maybe 2 minutes in, when he starts talking, it was so personal. I was like, how does he... It almost offended me because I felt like he knew something about me that, like, I was trying to tuck in. And I'm like, he is saying some real evidence stuff, and I don't know whether to be really inspired or really offended, because these are the thoughts I'm having. Lo and behold, you begin to understand that that's Tony Robbins, and he's been doing this before I was born, and so that opened up books, and books then led to reading more books, and now you have people on YouTube having these conversations, which again now are podcasts and are so in abundance. But at the time, it was ambivalent to me, and I was fascinated by what people were saying not just for these quotes that I think are cool to post on their Instagram with 30 hashtags and be behind a movement, but really because of what people were saying and because of the impact it was having on the lives of these people who truly wanted to do the work. And so, Tony Robbins led me to my first book that I ever read cover to cover, first time ever in my life. I mean, I made it through college spark noting, right?
There you go. That's good, man.
And it was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Yep.
I'll never forget. I read that book probably in 4 days' time. And this comes from somebody who, I mean, dude, if it was up to my mom's life for me to read a book, then sorry, Mom, I'm probably not going to read that book.
Right.
And I felt compelled to do it. And within that, easily 200-300 books in my lifetime that I've just kind of gone back and forth on. So
and that it was kind of the spark then for you to really grasp the power, the importance of mindset, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's what opened up mindset, and all these people were saying the same thing in their own tonality. And so I think that's what also helped me understand how can you have so many people from so many different walks of life really talking about the same thing, but in a very unique and circumstantial way. And that's what I understood about mindset. So then I became fascinated, utterly obsessed with drilling home mindset. And at the time, it was just listen. I think that kind of programmed the subconscious, but it wasn't until I got older, and the way that you said that you begin to understand that strategically there's a way that you're able to do that. And as I became not just this student sitting front row listening to the mindset, but finally doing the exercises in the books, going to the seminars and listening to what the people were saying, but actually hearing the message. Don't jump into the cold water if you know that it's going to be cold. Learn from my mistake. And finding out really what all these different strategies had, that's when I think it really took off, because then I became a student. And when I became a student, I was able to really understand what they were talking about. It wasn't just romantic information that was spiritual or soothing or aesthetic to the ears. I really began to understand what is the difference between unconscious mind, conscious mind, subconscious. How does that play into my life? And so when something bad would happen, I was able to step out of my perspective and say, how does this play into this concept that I heard earlier? And that was able to help me remove my emotion, and then help tell me not to react, but if I'm able to take a step out and knowing what was important to me, how can I move in a way that's going to favor my future, not the situation? Because oftentimes that thing that I needed to do that was going to help move me closer to my goal, that's not really something I wanted to do. But the thing I wanted to do in the moment would make me feel better. It's just that would be, retroactive in helping me move towards my goal. So that's really how the mindset piece really ingrained forever. That's how it found its way into my life, and since then it's only been really a ongoing uphill academic and spiritual base that's taken over my life.
I love it. Now, how do you take this knowledge of mindset and kind of your psychology background, how do you take that then, Nick, and apply that to you training your clients and having those people, or having that influence in those people's lives?
Excellent question. So I think you have to start small. I knew what the grandeur vision was, but to start off, it was with a client who had a goal, and understanding that there's going to be the fitness and nutrition stuff that I understood. At the end of the day, it's not figuring out the kindergarten art and first grade math of what to eat, when to eat, how to train, but it's figuring out why do some people do that and why some people don't, which is the study of psychology. And so really it's understanding and digging into the deep essence of the individual relationship. Then it's, I guess, seeing the pattern. Why are person A, B, C, D so different but so alike? Because people are more inclined to not reach their fitness goals, even if they say they are when you first meet them, knowing that there's a reason why. And so, hypothetically, if it's because doing the work is inconvenient, how can you begin to program a person's unconscious mind, or sorry, subconscious, to expect that work, and how do you help them cultivate strategies that's going to give them what I like to refer to as leverage, but at the end of the day, it's just putting something in the bank that's going to help them say, no, this is where you're supposed to be, and not go into that fear, that doubt that usually tells people you're going to fail, jump ship, right? Because that's usually what happens. People quit before they're ever able to see something resolved because they're scared. Once I was able to do that, and I think that again was really the start, what I understood is that there's nothing wrong with that, and there's always a need, but personally, I've always felt like there's more I can do. And so that's what helped me cultivate the brand Natt Fitness. So Natt Fitness is really everything that I do in person except online. So Rocky Mountain Flex Fitness is the brick and mortar that my business partner and I built. Natt Fitness is really the art of storytelling, building an online community, and providing people with strategies over diet, sports nutrition, mindset, fitness, and detoxification that can really help people find out, how do I engineer the platform needed to be successful, and then take my life to scale. And then from there, it's cultivating products. And I don't want to say products in a way where it's like, well, buy my product because it's going to help you, but essentially it is. It's there's businesses that put products out there to be profitable, right, Q? And the primary objective is that it's going to help you reach your goals, and in the end, you're putting money into a bank. I didn't want to curate a program or a product that was going to link me to an individual somewhere remote, right? Somewhere where someone isn't in the Denver metro area, and we're going to have a brief interaction, and then we're going to fall apart. How can, aside from the media that's happening online, how can we continue to hold each other accountable? How can they connect with those like-minded individuals that are going to be inspiring them to keep moving in perpetuity? How are we going to be able to be transparent? And I think that's what became so separate. So that's really how I've taken the mindset space, but then moved it into online to try to be able to not just help people, but really figure out how I could look at what is available and use that to inspire people.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Right.
Now I wanna step back into kind of your competitive story, right? So we've talked about kind of the beginning of you competing in men's physique and kind of getting bitten by that bug, and I want you to kind of talk about maybe just within the last year and a half or this last year, kind of like your competition, stepping into, I believe you're stepping more into classic physique. Is that correct?
Yes.
Cool. So from men's physique to classic physique, and for some of you listeners that maybe don't know the difference, just Google it. You'll find out. We don't need to take the time to explain the difference.
Sure.
But you start competing. We've heard a little bit about that. But I really, because I've been following you for quite a while on social media and just seeing some of your competition and some of the winnings and things like that. Just share with us, like maybe in 2019, how did the competitions go? Kind of like, what is your goal moving forward? Are you really pursuing that IFBB Pro card and things like that? I would love to kind of hear more about that competition.
Absolutely. So to talk and kind of bring this back, the goal was to build a lifestyle through competing. And it's not that you can't do that. I think it's just that it was the wrong picture. It was the right thing for the wrong reasons, right? And so a lot of that was because that was going to be the avenue. That was going to be my draft debut, my money.
Right.
And, despite contrary belief, at least I haven't seen it, no one gets extremely rich competing in bodybuilding. It doesn't happen. Now, you get that perception when you get bitten by the bug because you're seeing these top athletes, traveling and a million sponsors and living what seems to be this crazy lifestyle. And even if that's transparent, and a lot of times it's not, you're only seeing a very small piece of the pie.
Of course.
And so that was a hard reality to wake up to for me, but I'm happy it happened because it played into the bigger role. And so, for me, Natt Fitness was really a brand about helping inspire people to reach the optimal version of their life. So what does that mean? You don't want to be a bodybuilder. Great. You do want to be a bodybuilding. Fantastic. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do. Can I show you how the journey of ongoing, the infinite game, right, of health and wellness is going to play not just longevity of your health and how you're going to feel. How do you incorporate those same disciplines and dimensions in the outside world of the gym to scale your life where you want to go? And that's using the criteria of what's important to you. Do you know what that is? Do you know what makes you important? Do you know how to live a life of discipline? Well, how can you take those relative perspectives that you're going to learn in fitness? And so bodybuilding became an opportunity for me to satisfy two things. One, to show people vicariously this is what it's like to pursue a dream with ambition. And if you want something, this is what it looks like.
Right.
You know, to show people the good, the bad, the ugly. And then it's also a chance for me to stimulate that competitive athletic, you know, vigor that I have.
Right.
And so what ended up happening is I was doing well. I've had, you know, pretty successful wins. I was already on the national circuit with some great wins, some great losses, hard lessons, as I like to say, in the men's physique category. And stepping into classic physique, I knew I needed to take my body next level, but you have to be with somebody who's had that experience. And so having this conversation last December last year, in 2018, it was really who do I have one rapport with, who has the experience, the reputation will speak more than itself, and who can I trust, who can I build a relationship with. And so in short story, you know, Dylan, who you've had on the show before, you know, and I were able to draw some specs. I respect the guy. I was able to listen to a lot of what he had to say. It worked great because he lives in Denver. I live in Denver. Well, not in Denver, but close. You know, we live in the close proximity.
Of course, yeah.
And so what ended up happening is we went to work and we had the outcome, right? We had the outcome in our mind about what we wanted to do. But the day-to-day focus wasn't so much on the outcome. The day-to-day focus was on the grind. What do we need to do this? Well, Nick, it's going to require you to show up. It's the simple things. Get your butt up. Can you get the cardio and the training in? Can we perfect or get as, you know what, close to learning the biomechanics of time under tension, which is really what I needed to learn. So being an elite athlete, it's very easy to sip the juice of I'm good. Can you take the opposite approach and find out what it is you're not good at, right? And figuring that out. You know, the big thing for me was I had a very developed upper body from men's physique. As a matter of fact, that was a lot of the critical feedback I got was that I was overdeveloped for men's physique. Not a bad situation to be in, but I was underdeveloped for men's physique, like most men's physique competitors are making that transition. And so Dylan and I were like, all right, it's going to be legs. Legs are fun to train and they're evil to train. Man. It's the good dad, right? So Dylan and I spent a lot of time really focusing on that, and as a result, our goal was to pinpoint a goal that we could feel like we could go on there and really shake the judge's attention. Now, with that, the goal was to win a pro card. Knowing that we could win, we wanted to go in there and say, hey, what's a show that is going to set us up for success? What we also wanted was, if we have to go back to the drawing board, what would allow us a decent amount of time to go back to the drawing board and make another shot at that. So that was kind of the early 2019 conversation. What we decided was to do a local show, which I had not done in 5 years. So I was reluctant, man. It's hard to put yourself on a pedestal, which is pretty much launched, you know, not being, you know, without lying, what you do, because you're so used to traveling and competing, and to come back home and compete, it's humbling. You know, you want to do well. I have athletes, my parents, and my gym community. So we did a show with Mile High. We were able to walk away with an overall there, a lot of first place wins, which was excellent for the ego, right?
Right.
We go to junior nationals, and it was just like, get your feet kicked out from underneath you. The hard thing about that show wasn't so much that I wasn't ready, and there were a lot of things I still needed to learn. So it was opportunity, but with it, it also helped you understand that bodybuilding is not just a science of lifting weights and shakes and showing up on competition day. It had a lot to do with understanding what is the very essence that makes you who you are. Can you bring your essence to stage? Can you fine-tune the science and make sure that your body is at its best when the judges are going to see you? Because it looked fantastic the day that I started to load after weigh-in. By the second day, when you'd overloaded, it cost you. So that's what happened. I ended up getting, I don't know, maybe it was like 11th or 12th place, something like that. And, you know, to fast forward, I took some time off really to kind of get my head straight. And, you know, when I had the conversation with Dylan, we were going through a workout, and he just said the same thing that he's always said. If you're going to do it, do it. If you're not, take the time off. And that was all he had to say, because in that, he's already saying so much more if you really understand somebody who's got that kind of vision. But to me, it kind of brought me back to that quote of MLK, and I knew what I wanted. But the hard thing was that I was facing some adversity, and bodybuilding you take so personal because it is you doing the weights and all that stuff. And what I had to ask myself was not, you know, what do I still want, because that didn't change. What I had to ask myself is, am I willing to put myself out there on the line and willing to take the same loss? But even if I did have a very similar outcome, could I still magnify the journey? Could I still perfect and be better? And I felt like, honest to God, there's no way I can, with dignity, accept that as a season. So we decided to hop into Nationals, which was mid-November, not necessarily knowing where that was going to go. We had the opportunity to jump into the Rocky, so we did the same thing, had a very similar outcome, a lot of first place wins overall at the Rocky, which was great walking into Miami, which is the biggest stage on Nationals. So going into Miami, Florida, you know, it was exciting. A lot of the things that I had not done, I found a way to innovate and take the scale in the preparation going in. And as a result, man, we were able to take fourth in the world. I thought I should have gotten third, but at the end of the day, you know, we were grateful because this class, hands down, without doubt, was the most competitive class I've ever been in. Classic, you know, national level, local level. It was the most competitive. A lot of great guys in that class. Shout out to all of them. And, you know, the judges saw the package and saw the work. And so it was gratifying to have that payoff. And I think it's only been more inspiring because now it's been the same thing, but knowing what's worked and what hasn't worked, it's about fine-tuning and taking that into 2020 and saying, well, what can we do to not just, in short, you know, step over that fine line of amateur to IFBB, but make a name for yourself in IFBB, and not just, you know, can you accomplish the goal, get on the pro stage, but, you know, the pro stage, those people have a story. They have a story that they bring to life as a competitor, and what is my story going to be? And so we're starting to define that in the now as opposed to waiting. And again, as an athlete, that's great, but it also plays into a much bigger role for the story that's ongoing with Natt Fitness, with my community. So
I love it, man. That's super cool. Now we've been going for almost 80 minutes here, so we're gonna start moving towards that finish line. But I do, you know, I've had some, you know, Dylan's been on, Dylan Armbrust has been on the podcast. I've had, you know, Waddy on the podcast, so some gym owners and prep coaches and things like that. You know, I have never really had like a current competitive, you know, NPC athlete. So before we kind of like wrap things up, Nick, I kind of want to just get quickly into kind of some of the nuts and bolts in regards to like your training. You mentioned time under tension, kind of the TUT philosophy. But before we kind of talk about the actual training, I would love, because I mean you're a big dude and you're in off season right now, correct?
Yeah. What I'd say is grow season. Off season,
Grow
it's just
season,
because I
okay.
believe words have power.
Absolutely.
So it's funny because we were having that conversation about me eating.
Uh-huh.
People obviously can't see it, but we got my food over there on the other chair, and it's because it's the same thing. Whether you're in prep, I might be eating. The portions might be different, but it's bringing the food with you. It's getting the meals down. You do the same thing when you're 4 weeks out, a week out, versus when you're 22 weeks out, versus when you're 32 weeks out.
Right.
It's ongoing, but right now I'm in a grow season.
So,
absolutely.
I greatly appreciate you understanding the power of words, because like there's certain words that I don't use, so
Sure.
I appreciate that. So during the grow season, just to give people kind of a snapshot of what it takes in regards to eating, like kind of like what are your macro breakdowns during your grow season, and maybe you don't know them specifically, but just kind of like generally speaking, just again, so the listeners can understand what it takes to grow and to be, moving towards that professional status in regards to a bodybuilder.
Absolutely. So the way I like to think about it is that you need to do, the way I think about a grow season is that you have to have a vision in your head, right? So I think you need to be conscientious and you need to be very transparent. You need a set of eyes other than your own that you can really trust. And whether that person is a coach or whether that person is just a trusted mentor or someone who knows more than you need to be able to look at your physique the same way that a hockey player, or a basketball player, or a track athlete would look at what are the weaknesses and how are we going to build that. So I say that, Q, because I think it's so easy for people to just go into grow season and put the food in and just train arbitrarily.
Right.
And the reality is that's what you don't want to do, right? You don't want to get into bulk season. I'm going to eat all my food and just train hard,
right.
Because if you are actually indeed of cutting down all of that body fat that you put on the off season, you're going to realize that you didn't grow the way you thought you were supposed to. So that's kind of the 101. But what I do personally is I like to look at and really highlight what are the areas of my physique that I need to define. So for bodybuilders, because it's an aesthetic sport, it's understanding what are those exercises going to be. How can I incorporate that into my routine on a day-to-day or week-to-week that's going to allow me to grow? And then I build the food around that. So if I have an area like legs that I need to grow, obviously you're going to need more food for that day, right?
Right.
So for the average person, I usually say to maintain a good level of health, it's usually 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I think that's pretty standard,
of
right?
Course, yeah.
If you're trying to grow in a grow season, usually for women it's about 1.5. For men, it's probably closer to 2, right? So I'm easily at the 2. With that, I try to tuck in more of the carbohydrates and more of the fats. Now, what I will do is I will keep the calories around the fats and carbohydrates a lot higher. So, not going into too much of the science and making it too complicated.
Right.
It's just understanding that if I'm rotating macros, meaning that there's certain days where I'm putting no carbohydrates in, with the exception of complex like veggies, whereas I'm just sitting there focusing on restoring my glycogen stores. That carbohydrate intake could be anywhere from 65-70%, all the way down to 15% or 5% of the total breakdown. And then from there, you can really figure out what you're putting in based on fats. And so you can manipulate those variables to really stimulate the metabolism. But on a growth day, on a day that you're really trying to put a lot of food in to focus on a body fat, focus on developing a muscle, you want your calories higher intentionally, pre-workout and post-workout. And then on days that I would say are designed to really focus on metabolism or focus on going through the motions, you want to drop the calories, keep the protein high, and again, same thing, just focus on tapering those days. Now, to be very frank, a lot of times people are like, yeah, but what about when you're cutting? Again, it really depends on what look you're going for. And so the same way that I would talk about growing a body part, for competition, it's really unique to the athlete. And so I don't think it's as simple as just saying, I cut out carbs and increase the cardio. I think that's kind of the consensus. But how someone might train for men's physique or bikini or men's classic physique or whatever that is, you have to understand what is the criteria that the judges are asking for in addition to your body type, where are your strengths and where are your weaknesses. So I know that if we are 4 weeks out from a show and I'm looking at my body saying things are looking good as a whole, what could or should be tighter, that is what influences how hard we will pull certain micronutrients, how hard we'll do cardio. It's not ever the same. It could go up 1 week, down, and then back up. At the end of the day, how you look and how you feel are the driving forces of what you're going to do on the science. So
Perfect.
I just like to make that up front because I think it's a lot of people can get caught in the program, what the program says,
of course.
and it's like you it's never straightforward.
Right. And I appreciate that. So just let's say for you specifically during a grow season, leg day, again, just so the listeners can kind of understand, like how many calories approximately are you going to intake?
If I'm doing a leg day, what we try to do is that's when I'll incorporate a cheat meal.
Okay, perfect.
I'll definitely probably put in some sushi. Sushi's a little bit cleaner, and you don't have to worry so much about focusing on is the food going to have some value, because I know it will. It's fish. There's a lot of trans fatty acids in there. It's white rice, which again is something I have very evident. So not only are we having the conversation, not only are we having the conversation about is my body able to monetize the food, we're also talking about the gastrointestinal lining. That's why it's imperative not to go out there and eat something that you probably don't. I try to stay away from a lot of dairy, because if I put that in, my microbiome doesn't have the digestive enzymes and the bacteria to digest, and again, that's going to mess up me eating the food. So I'll probably eat, I would say I'll easily push over 5,000 calories.
Yeah.
Again, majority of those pre-lift or post-lift, or when that cheat meal is probably going in. I'm not too sentimental about what the cheat meal is, because it's a cheat meal.
Yeah.
The genuine rule of thumb is eat, don't plug it in to the point where you can't breathe. Eat when you're full, you're done. Put the fork down.
Yeah.
That's why I like usually eating after the workout, because generally you can put a little bit more in and kind of makes it more appetizing. For the carbohydrates, easily no less than 400 grams of carbs. For protein, my weight right now sitting off season is probably around the upper 250s, and so you can see how easily, I'm 2 grams per pound of body weight, so that's in between 470 to 500 grams of protein a day. And again, I always like to make sure I share that with everybody. I don't advocate that for everybody. Just understand that's something that was built over almost a decade.
Yes.
And so it has to be something that's circumstantial. And the last thing I'll say about that is getting in your phytonutrients. A lot of misconception is that bodybuilding is just about putting in the macros. Phytonutrients and your ability to have the dietary fibers, the irons, the electrolytes, equally important. How much water you're getting, because all of that stuff will play a vital role. So in conjunction to that, the two things that I'll say that I think that most people leave out that probably shoot athletes in the feet more than anything else are water intake. Again, not something I tell everyone they should do, but I probably drink about 2.5 gallons of water. That's been to scale. On a cut phase, when I'm really peaking before a show, we're probably doing closer to 4 gallons a day. And again, the electrolytes are, pushed in. And then sleep. And this is what I still struggle with, if I'm being completely transparent. But probably, if you're seriously looking to grow, that happens when you're sleeping. You cannot manifest the body that you're looking for. There's no shortcut to it whatsoever. Despite what everyone tells you, I think it's a bunch of you have to get the sleep in. If you're not monetizing 7 hours during your growth and even during your recovery period, then you're gambling.
Yeah.
So
Before we touch on the training, favorite cheat meal outside of sushi. You mentioned you go do the sushi. I want to hear the cake, pizza, cookies. What would you take?
I love frozen yogurt, man.
Ooh, okay, that's
I
good.
like the frozen yogurt stuff. I don't usually go too crazy on there. I like to put the fruit on there. I don't usually go too crazy and get the giant 32-ounce size. Right. It's just I like the bobas on there. I like putting the bobas. I like some pineapple, some strawberries, and it's enough for me to really enjoy it.
Awesome.
In a perfect world, oh man, dude, my mom, like you said, there's my parents are from the South, so there's two kinds of people in the world, Q. There's people who eat to live, there's people who live to eat. So fried chicken is definitely on the other side.
Awesome.
So the problem is, if I eat fried chicken, I'm probably taking a 4-hour nap.
Yeah.
But I would say that in a perfect world, it would be fried chicken with a decent size. But if not, man, honestly, for me, anywhere I can go sit down and have a really good Mexican dish or a really good Italian dish, because it's more about the ambiance.
Yeah.
It's great. Shout out to Ocean Prime. I mean, obviously I don't eat there too often, but that place.
Is that here in the Denver area?
There's one out on Larimer, downtown in Larimer Square, and then there's one down off of Bellevue in the DTC.
Okay.
It's kind of a little shout out to them. I should definitely hit them up for a sponsorship. But,
there you go.
If you guys are looking for just enjoying a really good, exquisite meal that's not going to leave you too far, down the side, but you want to be able to treat well, fellas. Excellent way to spoil your lady and say a lot. Just a shout out there. Excellent way to score some points if you guys are looking.
Cool.
So, yeah.
All right. So just quickly here, Nick, I would love to have you just kind of touch on kind of like the training. I know there's different training for different body types and what you're trying to do, but just kind of like for you personally, maybe what Dylan has you focusing on and the way that you're training with him, what does that kind of look like? Just a quick little snapshot.
Yeah, so, I think every athlete has their potential, and I mean that in terms of what you're able to do strength-wise. We usually don't push that, meaning we don't come in and say, what's the most weight you can do with this exercise?
Right.
We really bring that down, and the mantra is always, let's get the joints warmed up. Let's get a little bit of fluid in there. So the first set, even the second set sometimes, and for me it's really my hips and my shoulders. Like those days, if we're doing shoulders, if we're doing legs, it's like, hey, let's take the time, as much time as needed. If we have to do 3 warm-up sets and the weight is, at 45% capacity, then I say that 45% capacity, I mean that's 45% of a 1 rep max. So say hypothetically that my squat max is 400 pounds. What's 30% of 400? And then I'll start with that, and we'll go through the repetitions because that's generally pretty easy, right? So once that we're warmed up and that mind-body connection has been implemented, then what we really try to focus on is time under tension, right? And so the rep scheme can usually move anywhere between 15 to 20, which a lot of people think is volume, and it is. However, when you're lifting that at 75, 80%, it is anything but volume. Volume, there tends to be this notion that it's lighter weight, and I can tell you that's further from the truth. So
right.
If we can get 15 reps, we try to get that. If we can get 12 reps, great, but usually we try to stay around there, the rep range. And the movements and the focus are really 2 things. Can you connect with the muscle? What do I mean by that? Imagine, Q, you ever think about like squeezing a towel? Like if a towel gets dumped in, you're trying to squeeze out all the water.
Yep, for sure.
That is what every single contraction is basically like. It is immense, it's deep, it's tight. Second to that, it's sort of this very autonomous control. There's so much austerity in the ability for you to be able to let the machine or the weight that you're lifting, free weight especially, sort of control the movement when you get to a point where you've reached hypertrophy in the body, and hypertrophy being the extreme of fatigue, and your ability to, quote unquote, what I like to say verbally is stay in the fire. Can you stay disciplined in that part of the lifting phase when your muscles are burning, your mind is telling you to drop the weight, jump ship? Can you stay disciplined and control the movement almost like a pendulum swing. You see a pendulum, it doesn't really speed up at the top or the bottom, it just moves consecutively. That's really how we lift when we say time under tension, is the contraction phase and the eccentric phase moving almost in succession and continuum, and it just looks like your muscle, whether it's going up or down, is always being worked. That's how we've been able to maximize our results.
Awesome. I love that. All right. So, Nick, we're well past an hour and a half here. So thank you so much for just, the time and just sharing your story. We've had a very thorough conversation, covered a lot of different things in regards to training and just your personal story, competing, owning your own gym, things like that. I would love for you, if there's maybe something that's just really burning inside of your heart, or if there's maybe just kind of that one message that you would like to just kind of share with the listeners before I ask the last question. I just want to give you the moment here just to kind of share some of your last words, kind of your message with my listeners.
Absolutely. I think it would be two things. The first thing is just know that everybody has something that's emotionally compelling in their heart. Maybe you don't know how it's there. Maybe it's been there for a long time, and maybe it's just beginning to surface. The one thing I would say to people is don't ignore it. Don't ignore that. Q, we kind of talked a little bit about your story and the transition of 2019 and your transition from moving all in on the bigger vision. I think that everyone has something like that. Listen to that, because in the end, succeed or fail, you moving in, that's going to be the best of that's essentially why we're all here.
For sure.
That's where you're going to be the best. The second piece is consistency is key. Consistency will always outperform the best days and the worst days. You can have a lot of worst days, you can have a lot of best days, but if you're willing to get up and try again, and as so many people say, swing the bat, 100th time, you're going to get it on that 101st. So that's the two things that I would say to people.
Cool. So the last question I have for you, if there was one word that you could be remembered by or remembered for, or one word that you would want people to describe you in after your time on this earth is up, what would that one word be?
Persistence.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
I love it. Persistence.
Persistence.
So with that, again, I just want to thank you, Nick, for sharing your story. I want to thank you for coming over here to Edgewater and just spending some of your Saturday afternoon with me. And I just want to acknowledge you for your consistency, your persistence, and you pursuing, what is emotionally compelling in your heart, and that's pursuing that passion and that dream. I believe of what you want to do is becoming an IFBB pro, but during that journey, impacting as many people's lives as possible. So I just want to thank you for that. I want to acknowledge you for that. And if people have resonated with your story on some level or with all of it, if people want to find out kind of more about your gym, all the things that are kind of in your world, where can people find out more about you, Nick?
Well, thank you so much, Q, for having me on the show. And likewise, as much as you've acknowledged me, I want to acknowledge you for manifesting this platform to the audience members that dig into, your podcast. I'm sure I can, speak on their behalf and just say that thank you for taking the time out to bring the guests on the show, because if you're in a position where you're inspiring people the way that you are, then you're leading by example, but you're also pushing out some great light, man. So
thank you.
The feeling is very mutual. Thank
Cool.
you for having me. As far as being able to connect, I would say the biggest one is going to say, feel free to connect with me on my website, Natt Fitness. That's Natt Fitness, all one word, .com. And from there, all my social media is linked. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and people can have the opportunity to download my ebook and get involved in my deeper community. That's Abs, Energy, and Confidence, 4 keys to achieving the Holy Trifecta. And from there, I love just figuring out what it is that I can do to help people move closer to that point B, whatever that is in their life.
Any sponsors or anything you want to shout out, or?
Oh, yeah. Out here, first ones I'll say because they're out here in the Denver metro area. Shout out to Denver Sports Recovery. Great team, Dr. Marsha Prada, who's cultivated an incredible amount of team and other doctors out there, and their ability to really connect with active recovery. For those of you who aren't familiar with what active recovery is, feel free to definitely connect with me, and I'd be more than happy to show you guys what value they can do. But they've been remarkable in helping me be at my best, whether that's been on the recovery side or that's been to just help me go from day to day. So shout out to them. Shout out to my supplement family, Supplement Giant, Colorado. Great team, great bunch of people. They're all over. You guys can definitely connect with them, supplementgiant.com. And with that, also my sponsorships, my family, Allmax. I have my Allmax shirt on today because they're great. I love their supplements. I love the way they taste. I love the way they feel. And more importantly, I love how clean they are. So sometimes less is more. And with them, they give you the options to decide what that is. But no matter what you're picking up to put in your stacks, it's the best. And shout out to Flex Comics. I don't know if you guys are out there, any superhero fans or pop culture fans, but if you are, bring that to the gym. Check out flexcomics.com and Jeremy Flex and our organization and all the funny content that we push out to support and rep in the gym.
Cool. So 127 Fit podcast listeners, once again, I want to thank you for your listening ears. Thank you for hanging out with Nick and myself today. I know you guys gained a lot of value from Nick's story, just Nick's perspective on different things. So if you want to find out more about the guests that I'm bringing on to the podcast, or if you'd like to find out more about myself personally, you can find all of that on Instagram. It's at 127fit. Facebook is at Quentin Vars. LinkedIn is Quentin Vars. If you guys would do me a huge favor and please leave a 5-star rating and review, and also subscribe to the podcast, specifically in iTunes or the Apple Podcast app. That just really helps more people find the podcast, which means more people are going to be positively impacted. If you think you would be a great guest, or if you have a friend or an acquaintance you think would be a great guest or guest for the 127 Fit podcast, please give this email out or send me an email. The email is 127fit@gmail.com. And I also just want to mention, if you would be interested in financially supporting the podcast, you can also just send me an email, 127fit@gmail.com, and then we will pick up that conversation. As you guys are finding great value in a specific episode or episodes of the 127 Fit podcast, another great favor I ask of you is that you would take that specific episode or episodes and share it on your Facebook and Instagram stories using the hashtag #BeSomeoneToFollow. And per the usual, I will leave you with Proverbs 24:10, which states, "If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small." This time, until next time, I will catch you guys later.